Welcome to another Jaws Coffee Chat. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Jaws Mental Health Awareness. Today we have Jennifer, John, and Kurt. Please be sure to share and subscribe to our page or wherever you found us. Now let's get to the show. Over to you, Jennifer.
All right then, John. So this is the mental health awareness. What do you have, based off your experience of being off your regular routine, what would be some stuff you would share about dealing with the mental illness when you're off routine and there's changes?
Is this a question for me?
Yeah.
Okay, and repeat that question again.
Based off your experience last week, the wedding, you were off your regular routine. So what would you like to share that involves handling your condition, your mental health issue, while being out of your regular schedule? Like any ways you had to cope or any obstacles you had?
Right. Because of my disability, I was not able to help as much as I would like to have. But it was pretty stressful because I wanted to help more than I could. And the weather came in and changed everything, and I had to walk quite a ways to where the wedding was. And that was kind of stressful too. I actually did video with my cell phone from the front of the ceremony and took a microphone and strung it about 20 feet to the speaker where the DJ was, but it was so cold. I think the cold kept me from getting really, really stressed out, but there was just so much going on, and I was worried about my wife too because she made the wedding cake. And she had to get it all set up, and it got really crazy at the end. And then I just talked myself into not getting into a frazzle. And when the reception started, I just decided I was not going to go and do a lot of visiting. I was just going to kind of veg out. But a lot of people came up to me. I guess I'm a people person, so I kind of seek out people, especially at an event like that, because there was so many people that we knew that we hadn't seen in a long time. But I just decided that I wasn't going to try to force my way in and say hello to everybody. So, but a lot of people came up to me where I was sitting and eating and visiting and to the reception, and it just took a lot of stress off of me. But it was just the whole week was just very stressful. So
I have a question then. So you were saying you just basically decided you'd stay to yourself instead of approaching people, but you also said that you're an extrovert, which means you come out of depression by interacting with people. So were you having a moment then, struggling with your depression? That's why you decided to just shut down and be by yourself?
Yeah, I just had talked, and I had talked to my wife about this first too, because I've been having some issues with my diabetes too, and at the wedding itself, I got really lightheaded and shaky. So I was trying to deal with that too. But my wife was able to really kind of talk me down and just say, relax, take it easy. There's not a whole lot that you have to do. I needed help getting dressed because they had a suit for me to wear and everything, and I needed help getting everything on. So, and my grandson and my son's friend came in, and they really helped me get dressed. That was stressful too because we were running out of time, And I was just worried for my son with the weather changing so rapidly like it did. It just like overnight it changed big time. But it didn't ruin the wedding, but that had made me stressful because I was a wedding photographer for many years. So I was always worried about weather and where you're going to take these photographs. And if it gets too rainy and they have to get married inside, how you're going to deal with all of that. So my son came and picked me up, the one that got married, and we rode together out to the wedding and the reception site, which was about a 20-minute ride. So me and him talking, and I actually did a recording, but me and him talking about a lot of stuff really kind of calmed me down too on the way out. And so it was just, I can't put my finger on any one specific thing. It was just a bunch of different things that kind of um, took me to a place I didn't necessarily want to be. But as it turns out, everything came out great. It really did. And it was really a great day for them and our family.
Would you say it's a struggle as far as depression or anxiety based on what you went through? Maybe the shock of the cold weather or the sudden change?
I think the cold weather, once the wedding got started, there was just so much to do. I couldn't really think about myself. I was in the moment. And as I was videotaping the the ceremony and then the afterwards, and there was a couple of other photographers, and they were coming up and asking me questions. It was so busy I couldn't. The depression I didn't have time for it. You know. Um, and
So
I
the
remember
wedding kept you
coming.
distracted.
Yes, the wedding was very distracting. So it just and at the wedding I just thought of all these people that um, we had been around for years and years, family and friends and things like that. And you know, I actually went around the reception site and plugged in a little microphone to my cell phone, and I asked everybody to leave a message for the bride and groom. And I think I got like 30 different videos of people congratulating him and stuff like that. So at the reception, later on in the reception, that kind of took my mind off of a lot of stuff too. So it made me concentrate what I was doing for them. So sometimes a distraction and keeping yourself busy is a good thing, especially if you're having some depression and stuff like that.
Well, actually, my therapist was explaining the main reason they tell us to do different coping skills, whether it's some kind of art or it's going to some kind of activity, like let's say church or like coming on here to talk to you and so forth, that all these different coping skills are really distraction methods intended to distract you from whatever are those thoughts, whether it's something you're in anxiety, so it's calming you, or it's depression and it cheers you up, or just simply distracts you from whatever you're feeling. So let's say you could be depressed and you don't know it anymore because you're focused on the book you're reading or the picture you're drawing or whatever other coping skill.
Right. I think that's why you need to exercise every other day because that keeps you and you're working out your muscles. I know with me, if I go swim laps, I'm feeling pretty good the rest of the night.
Well, my
Um,
psychiatrist, or was it? Well, actually, it's both my psychiatrist and therapist that explained the reason for that. Do you know what the science is behind that?
no, can you tell
So,
me?
physical activity, exercise, that to kind of get your pulse up and get your heart racing, where it's a real workout and it's not just simply slow pace walking or something like that. Okay, so like for you, that's swimming laps. And I took up the challenge and I swam 14 laps last week
Oh,
after
good for
you
you.
gone.
Good for
Remember
you.
you told me I should do that? So I took up your challenge. And I did 14 laps in a row.
Okay, that's really good.
The key is, well, all these different exercises do when they get your pulse increase in your heartbeat is that they cause your brain to produce serotonin and dopamine that are two natural chemicals that are happy pills. Natural happy pills. They're chemicals our brains produce only when we get a real workout that bring us happiness. It's like an antidepressant, but it's a natural resource that you get and your brain builds by being physically active.
Okay.
So that's why we have better days when we do some kind of exercise in the morning. And like if you're the type to do the exercise in the afternoon or evening, you probably have a better evening than you did day.
Right. I have to swim. Usually, I try to get over there around 4 o'clock, so that's when I swim.
Is that AM or PM?
You know what? That's interesting because you guys know who Zeta is, and she introduced me to a Catholic priest by the name of Aham Noram. I'm actually going to be building him a website, so he's written a lot of information and a lot of sermons and a lot of things on what's going on in the killing fields over in Africa, because there's a lot of Muslims that are actually killing Christians in the different villages and stuff like that. So, anyways, I got talking to him about different things and telling him that I have periods of depression and stuff like that. And you know what he told me? He said in Africa, we don't have time for depression.
What?
That's what he said. He said we don't have time for depression. He said everybody goes.
Me, you don't make time to be depressed. I mean, that's an actual chemical issue in our brain. We don't choose to be. So that sounds like he's saying we choose to be this way because we have time to whatever we do to go this direction, versus it's something chemical in our brain that we have no control over.
Well, I asked him, explain it to me. What do you mean by that? And he said in Africa, we are working every day. We're so poor that we're working every day to just get food on our table, to get a roof over our heads. And he said it takes all of our brain power and physical power to stay on task to do that. We don't have a lot of opportunity like you have in the United States, and to think about things in a deep way. And so that's what he told me. That was his answer. That he is everybody in Africa, because it's so poor, are very concentrating on bringing in enough money for their meal that night, you know. And so, and I said, so with all the crazy stuff that goes on there and the killing field part of it and stuff like that, you mean people don't get depressed after they go through stuff like that?
I know, like PTSD or something, right?
Yeah. And he said, well, yeah, we do, but we don't, what do you say? We don't harp on it. We don't,
I get stuck on it?
Harp or keep going through it over and over and over again.
Reliving it?
Yeah, they don't relive it. And I think when we're depressed, we have a tendency to relive certain aspects of what's going on.
Well, we do neurologically and psychologically, because whatever is something that's why we feel depressed, the trigger, as we call it, often our brain keeps repeating that whatever incident or something that triggered it. And that's how we spiral down, is by we keep thinking whatever put us down, so it keeps putting us more and more down, further deeper.
Right. So I think he might be onto something there too. But, you know, like all depression is different also for each person. Some is like a chemical imbalance, and some of the events that we have gone through in our lives. You know, that's why you
Situational,
see
yeah.
so many. I know my depression, a lot of it has stemmed from my hip surgery and not being able to get around like I used to, you know. And then also with my hearing going and losing my hearing, um, that makes me depressed sometimes that I can't fully communicate with somebody.
Well, and something
That's
else to prove that it can be caused by outside sources and it's not 100% chemical based. It's a pandemic. Look how many more people who had never had any history of mental illnesses ended up seeing therapists or psychiatrists or some other kind of, maybe a psychologist, because of what the pandemic involved. Whether it was the loss of their job, it was the loss of their livelihood, like maybe they were depressed about their line of work just suddenly wasn't even needed anymore. In some jobs that were lost, the whole career, the line of work was lost and didn't come back. So certain people had to go back to college or somehow get further training to switch careers in order to get their livelihood back.
right.
And
And
there's all
I think,
kinds of other traumatic and dramatic situations that arise because of that point in history. And so that's these various things are what in some way or another cause different people without mental health issues to go mentally ill, whether it was depression, anxiety, or something, some kind of mental health reaction. So it's environmental, and that proves it. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, I think the the lockdown really did a number on a lot of adults and children too. And I think something else that's going on right now, I think the kids are somewhat coming out of it because they're going to school every day again. But a lot of, because of the prices of housing and rentals and owning a house has skyrocketed so much that there are a lot of homelessness going on, and a lot of people can't even afford to get a roof over their heads. So I think that has caused a lot of stress, a lot of mental health issues. Maybe a lot of people that were on edge before now because their rent is so much higher and they can't afford it. What do they do? You know, I know my wife and I went through a little period of that, but we were finally able to uh, afford a double wide mobile home, and that was a lot cheaper than trying to pay a rent or pay buy a big house. You know, so it was something we could afford, and we moved into. But for a while there, that really stressed out both of us, and now
Right.
that stress is kind of gone, and now all our bills are fairly manageable. So, but I think about this and I think about articles that I read about people that are trying to, they went from on their rental where they were living from like $1,100 to almost $2,000 a month. How high it jumped overnight. And these people can't afford that. There's millions of them. So the mental health issue is a big deal when it comes to that.
Well, yeah, because
You know,
their income didn't jump as much as that cost did. So how are they supposed to balance it if it was already balanced?
yeah, yeah, it's a tough situation. So if you have a mental disability on top of that, you know, it can cause some very big troubles. You know,
Well, it can
um,
even something like that with someone like us that already has depression, it can put us in suicide. You know how Kurt talks. I said
yeah,
someone like us that already has depression, that goes through something like that, could already be depressed, but then suddenly it puts them in suicide.
yeah, and it can. There's a lot of people that are like. what do I do? There's no point. I think that's the thing that happens. They come to the point where there's no point. What's the point in going on? It's this life here is too complicated and it's too hard. I think if you read the book of Ecclesiastes out of the Old Testament,
Uh-huh.
if you weren't a Christian or didn't know God, so you were an atheist and you read that book could send you over the edge because it's all hopelessness. But we know, as being a believer, that there is a intelligent designer behind the universe. That it does make sense. It does that there is a reason for everything, and that there is somebody behind everything that we go through in life. But for a person doesn't believe in God, that book itself could really put you over the edge.
Like depression and put you deeper? Yes.
Yes, because one of the questions is asked there is, what's the point? What's the point? It's just like with the universe itself. They say that the Big Bang and the universe is moving away at a rapid rate, and if there was no God, everything would just slow down, stop, and just burn out. And there's no point in the universe either. All of it is just wasted time and space. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people when they're depressed. They just think, what's the point?
Well,
What's the
I could
point?
confess, yes, that is true. I like
Yeah,
when I've had my recent ones, as in the last 2 weeks, I would think, what's the point in living? I have no reason to live anymore. Well, if I had actually obeyed those, I wouldn't be here making a podcast with you, John.
right,
So I can tell you, I didn't lose my home, you know, and it wasn't until the pandemic that I started receiving disability. And it wasn't until the pandemic that I had my brain surgery and so many other things that I had some good things happen in that horrible time. But still, that even though life seems to be getting better for me, I still have those times that, I've got a home, I've got food to eat, I've got everything I need, but I still wonder, what's the point in living?
right.
Because we don't even have to necessarily have a life changing situation versus just our
Mm,
chemicals get thrown because of, like, with me, with my autism, I can't handle sudden changes, unexpected changes. But if I get something sudden, unexpected, that's exactly where my head goes, is that there's no point left to live. So there's with
right,
that, there's an intermingle of the neurological, which is the autism that's physically different in my brain, and then the psychological, that's the depression and this reaction to the sudden change or sensitivity to it, maybe.
right.
So even some
Um,
things gets nerdy into the whole a mix of not just neurological, I mean, not just psychological, but even neurological things that have to do with the physical difference of our brain. Whether it's the chemicals or it's the shape or it's missing certain parts of our brain or, all kinds of where the two sides end up being like sisters. And that's why the same doctors that have a license for one also have a license for the other.
yeah, it's a complicated situation sometimes. I know I almost committed suicide about 12 years ago after I had my last operation on my hip. And they put me in a home for 2 weeks, right around Christmas time. And they said it was a situational depression because of all the times I had when they operated on my hip and they were trying to fight the infection. They had me cut open so many times. And every time I saw my doctor about my hip, he said, we still have a problem. We still have a problem. We still have a problem. They were fighting this infection because it almost took my life, and then it almost took my leg all the way up past my hip, and they were able to put me in a hyperbaric chamber and put a special pad in there to suck the infection out. And then eventually they had to cut 4 inches of my femur bone off. But after I got out of all that, I got really suicidal. But they said it was because I was put under anesthesia so many times. Anesthesia can cause situational depression too.
Well, it may not be
Yeah.
situational. It may be actually chemical because think about it. A sedation medication or chemical is sedating, or in other words, calming activity in your brain, reducing activity. And anxiety is too much activity in the brain. Depression is not enough activity in the brain. So that could have been a chemical reaction if you think about it, because it reduced the activity with the intentions of putting you to sleep. But people like you and me, it actually calms it too much, so we get depressed when we wake up because we don't have enough activity going on in our brain.
That's interesting.
Well, that's what it is.
Um,
Anxiety, you're finicky and worrisome because you got too much activity. And that's why a lot of times when people are anxious, they get restless or kind of antsy and, moving constantly because they got too much activity. Versus think about when we get depressed, we often are more sedentary than normal, or at least we have a tendency to want to be. We have a tendency to want to sleep more. And a lot of other things that are the lack of activity, whether it's physical or it's mental. Like sometimes I know, at least myself, maybe I don't want to do my job because I'm depressed, or I'm not motivated to do my job, or I feel too tired to do it, or all these other things that is some kind of lack of drive, lack of interest. It's a shortage. The brain doesn't have enough stimulation going on. Versus anxiety, it has too much, and that's why somebody's restless when they're anxious. At least that's common, but not always. Some
right.
people end up being more vocal. They talk a lot more when they're anxious. But then when they get depressed, they sit down quietly to themselves.
Yeah. It's complicated and it's different from everybody. But that's why what we're doing right now, we're talking about it. And that the very fact that we're talking about it uh, is a good thing. It, it helps us to try to come to the end of it, come to some kind of an understanding, um, because you don't want to tell everybody that you have bouts of depression, because I think that scares a lot of people too.
Well, a
So,
lot of people won't speak up like you and I will. You and I will do like this. We're on a podcast, and how many people around the world can see this and hear what we're saying that's vulnerable, right? But think of all the people that won't speak up, or they feel ashamed they have to see a therapist to where a point that they won't even go see it because they're too ashamed, and so forth. And yet they benefit by hearing what we're saying right here publicly, so they can be one of the people that hears this, and maybe it says, hey, look, these people have these different depressions and other conditions, and look what they're doing, making a podcast. Maybe that means listeners can say, maybe I can do my kind of job even though I have whatever condition, a mental health illness. Or maybe it means they could see a therapist to learn this stuff, like we're saying, because they obviously know from what we talk about that we see therapists.
right.
So
And
it could be
and the thing,
motivation. It could be inspiring to a lot of people.
yes, and one of the things a lot of people should remember is that people with depression, heavy bouts of depression, are very creative people. Um, I found that very interesting when I found that out. Throughout history, we have different leaders that were rather depressed people. And one of them, right off the top of my head, was Churchill during the Second World War. He was very depressed all the time. But, and I think in a lot of ways, depression can almost be a gift because a lot of people tell them things that are not true. And at the time, just with Churchill, when England was being attacked by the Nazis, a lot of people said, "Oh, this will pass over. This will the Nazis don't want to go any further." But he actually could look at a situation, and he could tell which were the wrong ones and things that were wrong not to believe. So sometimes people with depression have a filter there that it keeps them on keeps them understanding what is really happening. And that is something I have found very interesting. So through the course of history, some big leaders that we have had were depressed people, and they were able to navigate the situations that we're going through, complicated situations, with more of a realistic understanding of what was happening. Because a lot of people lie to themselves, they let other situations lie. And I don't know, with your depression, sometimes you look at something and somebody says something to you, or you see something in the news and you go, instinctively, that's bullshit. And I think that's part of the reason that because we have
Well,
depression,
let's keep this clean for in case teenagers or whoever want to hear it.
okay. Well, that was BS. Sorry about that. But I think in our head, and that's what Churchill was able to do, and even Roosevelt had bouts of that too because of the situation with his legs. He was depressed to some, and he had to actually go. He was in a camp for, I forget what he had, MS or something, and he couldn't really stand up or walk. Um, and it got worse towards the end of his life. So he was living in this camp with a whole bunch of other people that had the same situation. And a lot of people didn't even know that. Here is a man that's ruling a country that is in the midst of a world war that is engulfing the whole world. And here he is having to take a certain amount of time off. But when he would come out of that, he understood things more so than a lot of other people did. So, um, so it's a very interesting situation, and I know it's happened to me. I know I hate the feeling of depression. I hate the grayness. No matter how sunny it is outside, how everything just has a tendency to feel very gray, and then at times it almost turns black. Have you ever had that where your whole outlook on the world gets very black?
I did in grad school because my fourth year, senior year of undergrad and grad school, I was living with my dad, and he was having it where I couldn't leave the house or go anywhere except to go to my job or to go to the library or bookstore when I needed to do research for my studies. But he wouldn't let me just go somewhere to see a friend, to have lunch with a friend, or whatever kind of social life. He said, no, either you work or you study to get your degree, or if you got that kind of time to go hang out with your friends, you're going to do some kind of tour around the house. We got plenty for you to do. So to me, that was a very dark time.
Say that again. To you, it
To
was
me, that
what?
was a very dark time because I couldn't have a social life. I couldn't do anything besides work, sleep, study, housework. And like my sleeping was entreated, or what's the word? Anyways, things invaded my sleep time because Dad would put another to-do item on my list or something that's going to have to get up earlier because in addition to what I already have, like school and my job, I'd have to also do this certain chore around the house. And personally, having my autism, and basic skills like taking a shower and brushing my teeth being already a struggle because of my condition, those were the things I gave up, and I'd only take a shower or brush my teeth every 3 weeks. I was just scraping by. But because I lost interest because of both depression and my autism that makes basic life skills so hard. But like to me, that was a very dark time in my life.
Did your dad? Did your dad?
Huh?
Did your dad understand that? Did your dad understand that? What you were
Well, he's
going
on the
through?
deathbed now.
He's what?
He's on the deathbed.
Yeah, but at the time, did he understand what you were going through?
He told me in later years that he just wanted to make sure I made it through school and got that degree. But I don't think he ever really understood my conditions.
Okay. Because just getting out of school and graduating, that that condition is going to still follow you everywhere.
True, but it made those 4 years, my 3 grad school years and my senior year in undergrad, a dark season for me. So with your question, that's when I had a dark season. So yes, I know what it's like.
Okay. I think there's a lot of people that have gray days and then sometimes they got black days. I haven't had a real black day for a long time now, but I have those gray days and they're different colors of gray sometimes too, you know. And I think that's why I enjoy going out to my garden and watching stuff grow and seedlings grow and they're producing vegetables and stuff like that. And I go out there and I'm in amazement that these things are functioning and growing like they are, no matter how I feel. They just need water and sun. But sometimes it's gives me a chance to really come out of myself and visit with them on a different level, you know. Are you still there, Jennifer? It looks like Jennifer disappeared, so it's just me on here right now. So that's where my depression sits, but I think depression can come from many other things too. If you got a physical disability that stops you from doing what you used to do, and you lost your home or you lost your income, how do I get back on a saddle and get connected to that again? So I think it's really important to stay busy. Um, and it looks like we might be done here. So, anyways, this is John from Mental Health Awareness for Jen's Books and More. And we're glad that you came in to visit and that you'll find this link on our website. Okay? It looks like Emily or Jennifer is trying to get back in again. So, um, okay. So, there we go.